right, all right. Well, I'm always really happy and proud of the people that maybe were out late last night to get to the 9 o'clock session. So congratulations to you guys. Thank you for joining us. This is the third year that food tech has been a featured focus area at CES. 2022 kind of counted because it was like during still kind of during the pandemic. So this is like kind of the second year, really, I would say. But we have a great day of content up ahead for you, and I couldn't be more excited than this first session, which is kicking us off. We're going to be talking about the intersection of AI and food, and we have a great nerdy moderator and a good friend of mine, Surj Patel, to kind of lead us and kind of take it from here. So Surj, I'll hand it over.
Great, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. My name's Surj Patel. I'm a former product manager, technologist, graduate of the Media Lab at MIT. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about technology, and I love cooking and food. So I've been a long-time collaborator with Michael. I just want a quick indication. How many hands up? Product people, product managers here. Because I'm gearing this talk towards people who are trying to make a decision about how to use AI in products, yeah? Good, all right, thank you for that. I appreciate it this early in the morning. All right, so I'm going to kick off, and essentially, we're going to be looking at what AI is going on. The theme of this year's CES is AI. So with that, I'd love to actually get the panel to introduce themselves, your company, your core proposition. And one of the first things I want to get through to the audience is there are different types of AI. So what type of AI are you using? Let's start with you, Derrick.
So good morning. My name is Derrick Johnson. I'm the CEO of a company called Encounter AI. We help restaurants, frontline workers essentially reduce friction. And the core value proposition for the machine learning that we're using is natural language processing. We're doing generative AI so that we can have a corpus of knowledge specifically around retail and frontline. And then using all of that to create predictive powers and then also understand what folks are talking about at these locations.
Derrick, can I just translate for you? Just a quick few words.
Go ahead.
Break the ice a little bit, but Derrick's working on basically an AI that will take orders much more accurately than a human and reduce that level of stress, correct?
Absolutely.
Cool. Yep. All right, Oliver.
Hi, my name is Oliver. I grew up in Germany and moved to the US for my PhD about 20 years ago. My background is in astrophysics. I spent time in the tech industry, including at Impossible Foods before starting Climax Foods. Climax Foods is essentially building a platform, an operating system for the food industry. The question we're trying to answer is, given that all nutrition originally comes from plants and that we've used plants for about 10,000 years in a kind of weird way by funneling them through animals' complex metabolism, which wastes about 90% of the calories, which is arguably the most outdated technology on Earth, is there a way to use the plants directly, to metabolize them, given that 99% of all biomass, edible biomass, and over 99% of all functional biodiversity is in plants? Can we just use that biomass directly instead of using animals, which waste the majority of the inputs, pollute the environment, create pandemics risks, suffer in the process because it's a very inefficient operation. So you have to cut corners everywhere, which harms the animals, the planet, the humans that are involved in that system. And that question hadn't really been tackled in a holistic way when we started 4 years ago. So we use data science because it is the only means to really screen the entire plant kingdom, not just for ingredients that can recreate these functionalities, but also for simple, clean processes through which you can turn these ingredients into more functional ingredients that behave more like the animal product.
Wow, that's actually very transformative and futuristic. So if I was trying to, again, break the ice a little bit here, you're like the Tony Stark of vegan cheese.
Yeah, so cheese is the first category that we have launched because it's really hard. People have a very high bar, especially when you're talking fancy cheese, right? It needs to congeal, it needs to coagulate the right way, it needs to ferment and age the right way, it has to have exactly the right flavor, texture, visual appearance. And so sort of the highest bar is when you meet artisanal French cheesemakers or fancy Michelin-rated chefs like the ones that have our cheeses in their restaurants now. We're in, I think, 3 of the top 10 restaurants in the United States right now. We just launched last year. That is really hard to get right, and when you're starting with the toughest goal, it's kind of like, the Tesla Roadster. It's very hard to get a sports car to be very satisfactory to people. Then you build technologies that are so versatile that you can scale them to simpler product categories, and that's exactly what we found. We learned so much in the process of making cheese that we can apply to other products that we're now scaling.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you, Oliver. Ben,
Surj.
tell us what you do, what you sell,
Yep.
and describe your operating system.
Will do. So I'm Ben Harris, co-founder and CEO of Fresco. We're essentially a software company that work with many of the large kitchen appliance manufacturers focused on making perfect cooking simple. And that's really what drives us across the board. I think that's really what's, to be honest, transformed and driven the kitchen appliance space over the course of the last 100 years, from ovens and motors going into stand mixers and inverters going into microwaves sort of 50 years ago, and air fryers now transforming the kitchen in the last couple of years. And I think that's how, as a team of technologists, we're coming at the problem. You know, how do we leverage the latest and greatest technology to make perfect cooking simple? And we see now with, first of all, obviously IoT and the wave there that we've seen over the course of the last 10 years, the opportunities that brings up. Then we see now the opportunities with LLMs specifically and large language models to dramatically personalize experiences for home cooks. Layering that on top of all of the screens now available in the kitchen to deliver contextual, helpful tips. And then we see the 2 million plus content creators online creating recipes to help people to cook, that there's now this inevitability of this delightful cooking assistant that can deliver on this promise that we've heard about since the 50s. And that's really what I think Fresco have been, I suppose, disappointed in the market in that this hasn't arrived yet. So we've realized we need to arm the market with the tools to deliver on this opportunity that everyone's screaming out for. So we've built an OS and a platform that is leveraged. Yesterday we announced a partnership with Panasonic here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So delighted to be working with them as well as multiple other appliance partners to deliver this cooking assistant that can make recipes, tailored to your needs, tailored to your family, tailored to your dietary needs, to help you on that cooking process, but deeply integrated into appliances and their sensors, so you can get crispy chicken and perfectly crispy sweet potato fries.
That was a part of the question there, was the types of AI. And like the agency that you're describing that is you're creating, that needs different types of AI. Can you just describe a little bit about that? And I'll actually, Oliver and Derrick, describe the types of AI natural language processing you're using, because I think it's important that the audience understand how are you using these building blocks. So
first of all, I suppose we've been investing in AI for over the course of the last sort of 4 years. Ever since we started releasing products out to market, consumers have always said we want all of our recipes to work with Fresco's guided cooking experience. So we realized the need and the opportunity to leverage AI to personalize any recipe from the web to allow you to cook with it. We had been using, up until about 6 months ago, a machine learning pipeline to where it needs large amounts of data to deliver on that promise. Obviously, with LLMs coming out over the course of the last 6 months in particular, we have been testing multiple different models and have now completely shifted our approach to leveraging LLMs and have allowed us to deliver on pieces that we didn't think would be possible, within the next 5 years. Have now been accelerated to months.
Well, actually, the quick question there. So a lot of your customers are like people in the audience, right? How are they understanding AI and approaching? Or are they banking on you to basically educate them or learn? How are they perceiving AI in products?
It's really interesting, I suppose, to see this similar. So Fresco started, a little over 10 years ago, making a pipeline of our own smart products. We made this smart kitchen scale that went live in all the Apple stores, English-speaking Apple stores in the world, with a connected kitchen scale, with a guided cooking experience. So we sort of started with this IoT platform back then. Then we pivoted once we got a lot of interest from the appliance manufacturers to help them with the IoT piece. And we saw some companies out there at least leading in to build IoT for the sake of IoT. You need to tick the marketing box of having an IoT appliance, and we saw that.
I'm going to come back to that. That's
hurt the
important,
market.
actually, all three.
Yeah.
Actually, we'll keep out of this panel, but
We're
carry
really,
on.
I suppose, there is similarities. I think there has been a huge amount of education, I think, in the last 10 years in and around sort of IoT and software leveraging across appliance manufacturers. And they see now the opportunity to not repeat the mistakes of the past and leverage AI to actually deliver great consumer experiences.
Yeah.
But it's a big learning curve to move away from a place to where all of your content needs to be data, essentially.
Well, look, I mean, okay, so gentlemen, I'm going to really come back quickly because I want to hear your AIs, but I just want to follow up a point here, Ben. How are your customers implementing AI? Are they trusting you to do it? Because where are you going to find a machine learning engineer? You barely got an IoT person on board and brief them, and you're laughing, so I might pick on you next. So come on. So Ben, start. I mean, tell us briefly, and I'll get to Derrick. But how are your customers? How are they expected to have the staff on board to support a product line or service?
Fresco's premise, I suppose, in sort of building the tools to empower appliance manufacturers to deliver these great consumer experiences for their customers, really focuses on the fact that there's 100 appliance manufacturers globally that ship between them close to 1 billion appliances a year.
Yeah.
And it does not make sense for every one of those 100 appliance manufacturers to have a team of AI experts. It does not make sense for them to then have a team of IoT build it for every single one of the appliance manufacturers to try and build the exact same thing. It just does not make commercial sense. So yes, they are now all, many of them are turning to Fresco to be these specialists in recipe understanding, guided cooking, and sort of how that feeds into nutrition and the likes.
Derrick, on to you, and then I'm going to go to you, Oliver. But Derrick.
So in terms of the AI that we use, right, we've had to build up some proprietary technologies. One, kind of first and foremost, is just speech recognition, right? Most folks are unaware, but your average mobile phone may have 4 to 6 microphones, right? When you think of, for example, our first application, restaurant drive-thrus, that same speaker's been out there for the last 20 years, right? And so understanding voice amongst background noise, kids in the back saying that they want their favorite drinks and toys, and then the parent that's like, hey, I actually want this, listen to me, right? And we've had to find simple ways to really solve all of those problems in really the fastest performing environment, right? In less than, a few hundred milliseconds, we have to be able to understand what that person is saying, understand then how that relates to a menu item, and then upsell that customer, right? And do all of that, fairly fast and efficiently, right? And getting it wrong means a person leaves, right? And so there's a direct business value proposition that's tied to that, right?
Derrick, is that like generative AI? Are you using open chat? Because that's a conversational engine. So seriously, that must be what you're using to do that. Are you or are you not?
A combination of technologies, right? So some of it's just old school 80s natural language processing, right? Where it's like in milliseconds, how do we identify common phrases, right? Coca-Cola, Sprite, Pepsi, McChicken, things like that, right? Some of it, like you mentioned for the large language models, are more nuanced, right? When folks are doing more implicit conversations, can you make that a particular drink or a particular beverage change or item change? That's where those large language models give us that exponential value, right? Where we don't have to go code every different instance. You can actually leapfrog a lot from a technology advantage perspective. And that's really allowing us to solve the problem, both hit those speed marks, hit that accuracy mark, and then ultimately transform that customer experience.
Oliver. I see you contemplating. I saw your face twitching like you want to say
There's
something.
a lot to
Gentlemen,
say.
feel free to interject. This is a conversation to educate this audience. So
there's a lot to say. So when we started the company 3.5 years ago during COVID, we started with the hope that we could make zero compromise products. Because when you have a truly sort of a true successor that is better in every way, then you don't need to convince consumers that this is better for the environment, better for their health, better for the animals, you name it. But only then, right? Otherwise, you're basically always going to fight that uphill battle. So we're starting with this roughly 10x competitive advantage that we have over animals because we use the plants directly and don't waste most of the input to keep the animal alive. But then we need to preserve as much of that advantage, and we have to have a product that is again truly better in every way. To do that, when you're building a truly transformative technology, you need to leave no sort of stone untouched. I learned some of this at SpaceX, where I spent some time, Really no assumption. You weren't allowed to make an assumption that something somebody else had done a certain way is the best way to do it. You needed to basically question every assumption. In our case, we needed to literally understand 3.5 years ago, why do animal products taste the way they do? Nobody had ever answered that question because it was from the business perspective, worthless question. Animal products are what they are and have been for we invented them 10,000 years ago, and it's important to note humans always tinker in food and always try to make better food, right? And when we started when we came up with dairy, it was one revolution in our interaction with the environment to make better food, and it's natural for us to strive for the next evolution now. But to be able to do that, you need to understand what makes these products so craveable. So we built, dozens of essays, dozens of ways to characterize food products to really understand why does a steak sizzle the way it does, why does the aroma, why do precursors in the product metabolize in the way they do to have the final flavor profile, texture profile. In cheese, why does it melt and stretch the way it does? Nobody knew that.
Ben, you had something to say?
Oh, it's fascinating.
No,
there's actually a lot of crossover and similarities in just like where it's chemistry,
Exactly, but the critical thing is because food is so complex, you cannot apply one machine learning technology to all of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We use to finally answer your actual question, we use very different we have over 20 different platforms that we use for protein functionality prediction, lipid prediction. We literally needed to invent, we have patents around how does humans' whole olfaction is the perception of flavor through our mouth when we eat it, and then there's this retronasal reflux that goes back to our olfactory bulb, which has 400 distinct types of receptors, or we can sniff the food directly. Super complex way in which we've evolved to interact with the environment to be safe and to be well-fed and so on. We needed to understand that from scratch because there was never a business incentive to understand it before we came around. So we have patents around how does human olfaction work, which is kind of crazy.
That's nuts. That's great. Derrick, anything to add to that? All right, because I was going to say, you all answered my next question perfectly, so I'm going to skip to the third one, which was, how has AI empowered you to have a transformative product or service experience? And you just answered that beautifully. Great, so thank you for that. So, I'll go on to the next awkward, pointed question from the British accented moderator. 2 to 3 years ago, everything was labeled smart, especially here. They even started a new zone of smart product, smart this. You should know, Ben. You've been here a couple of times, and you follow this for as long as I have, IoT and tech and smart. But it was really unclear whether the audience understood what smart meant. Buyers, right? My sister is a great example. She's nearly 70, but she's like, oh, I bought this, it's smart, so it should be good, right? It's like, are we doing the same thing with AI? Because just the day before yesterday, I think Boston Consulting Group did a survey of senior executives. 65% were happy to put the word AI on their products and not know what it is or means because they will figure it out, as they did with smart, apparently. And I'm like, oh, this could really go wrong. Your thoughts? So, what's going on with AI? And actually, given you just signed a deal with Panasonic, talk about how your clients perceiving it. And let's be honest, our people do know they understand what AI means, and do the customers understand what AI means?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that.
There is.
Yeah, it makes me think of we've got an amazing board member, a guy called Steve Horowitz. He was 8 years in Apple, one of the founding engineers of Android, announced Android at Google I/O in 2008, and we sort of see ourselves as this Android for the kitchen. He was engineering leader in Snapchat. When we brought him into the board originally, I thought he was a techie, and it was only after probably about I'm not sure if I've ever told Steve this, so hopefully he's not listening. But it was only after about 6 months when he kept coming back with really great product insights and amazing product ideas that I realized, his career had been forged in Apple, and the ethos there is really sort of, we try to bring it now into Fresco as well, that the technology is just a tool that enables the consumer experience. And if you lean too much into, oh, it's smart, oh, it's IoT, oh, it's AI, from a consumer point of view, I think it can fall in deaf ears, and I think this is what we've definitely seen in from an engagement and usage point of view from consumers. And we saw that and have seen that in smart and IoT. And there's a danger it happens in AI. Obviously, there's a huge amount of interest in AI right now, and we are going through this transformational sort of once in a generation change as to sort of how different the world's going to be in a couple of years because of this AI and LLM wave specifically. So I think executives and ourselves as well are leaning into that. But I think it's really important to come back to that consumer message and just like, what is the value you're delivering, and just starting there.
Mm-hmm. Oliver, coming on to you, because you have one of the most intriguing propositions. You're creating completely brand new foods and proteins that have never existed before from things that exist and are around us. It's an alchemy. How do you present this to people without them going, well, this is hyper-processed food?
Yeah, it's actually a very simple answer. Animals are the most hyper-processed food that you can imagine, right? The fact that you lose 90% of the inputs means there's an enormous metabolic, very complex multi-organ metabolic factory turning the inputs into all kinds of different things.
Absolutely,
it's almost if you want it to be really inefficient in a lab, it's almost impossible to compete with that, right? It's not. But that said, what we found is sort of this convergence towards simplicity. Our products are not just much more indistinguishable from the animal target, and they're actually indistinguishable in blind tastings from the animal target. But they also have cleaner labels. We have no gums, no stabilizers, no flavor additives.
No, true.
It's all derived naturally from the plant ingredients just by understanding the plant ingredients really profoundly. So for instance, it's not actually new proteins. The proteins we use have been in human diet for literally tens of thousands of years. We just take a protein and run it through simple non-chemical modification steps. For instance, a temperature-induced coagulation of the protein that is gentle. And this is something humans have always done, right? I mean, you know this better than most people. We've always tinkered with food. It's natural for us. It is super unnatural for us to not tinker with food, to not try to turn what is around us into something that is tastier, safer to eat, cheaper to make, and so on. So we're basically just using AI to accelerate the pace of convergence towards the best possible products, which in our case mean products that replicate the animal product experience perfectly while being more nutritious and cheaper.
Okay. I love that personally.
Good.
I just
go ahead.
I just got me thinking about sort of your Turing test for cheese. So it's like, does this taste better than sort of my Délice de Bourgogne? And it's just, is it better or is it not? It's amazing to just think about that journey specifically and how you deliver on it.
Well, it's an interesting question because you kind of got to meet the consumers where they are, right? You got to sort of assume the best possible taste for a blue cheese, like the one we launched, is the blue cheese they have eaten, right? You can then innovate a little bit around it and sort of add some, floral components that they might find really interesting.
You brought some samples, haven't you? I remember the last time Mike was like, "You've got to try this. You've got to try this." I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it." And by the time I got there, it had gone. And people were truly amazed. Yeah. Do you have enough for a few people to try it today, or
maybe tonight at the reception?
Okay.
Nice.
You'll have to come and get him at the reception or get him after the panel, but do try it. Apparently, it's amazing, and I'm one of the things. But Derrick,
just to double click, right? I think it's the idea of tinkering, right? For me, I don't want to date myself, but like the Jetsons, right? Like I think every decade we have this moment where society, the zeitgeist of humanity, we try to make our imaginations match our reality, right? And AI is just that moment, right? And so for us this time, we're like, hey, like this is now the most human-like era that we've been in, right? I think when we talk about the modern language models, hundreds of millions, if not billions of people have tried these solutions, and they're actually fairly impressed where we're actually hitting that line where like, it's almost reality, right? And so when we go back to the badging, the smart versus AI, I think smart was like first principle, grids, right? And now we're at a different plane, right? So if you say smart was 2D, we're now in a 3D era where like context is going to be involved strongly in these environments and going from there. So,
yes, absolutely. Actually, that's sort of like you got me excited now. I'm on the excited phase, but I mean, I'll go back onto the awkward questions in a second. But so, what sort of talking about AI and transformation of food? What are some of the exciting experiences? I mean, yours is, it sounds mundane, but it's actually, the amount of friction that can be generated in an exchange with a person is huge. Yours is like completely safe, brilliant things from environmentally friendly and animal friendly and the vegetarian ethos, but without giving up the satisfaction of chewing on a steak. And you can see that everywhere in this town. And Ben, yours is like magic. I mean, essentially, you are all creating a sort of magic, hidden and very overt out there with this technology. Is this what the AI alchemy is, that we can start to create magical, almost, as Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technologies are distinguished from magic? And I had this with a call with the CTO of Citrix, and he was like, you're absolutely right, Surj. It's all about magic. We create magic out there for people. Is this what AI is going to do, or is it going to be tragic?
Yeah, I mean, I have an example for that. I mean, for me, one of the most satisfying experiences is this sort of better in every way experience, seeing that in people's faces, right, when they taste the product.
Yeah.
The idea that you can have something as indulgent as, as an aged cheese or, another animal product that I grew up in Bavaria, right, so I basically only ate animal products as a kid.
I love ham, Bavarian ham.
That you can have that, and you can have something that is a superfood, and you can have something that's good for the environment, and you can have something that's cheaper than the thing you grew up with. That, it almost doesn't compute. Like, people aren't ready to imagine that. It's kind of like, again, I shouldn't go too much down the electric car analogies, but, before Teslas, people didn't think electric cars could be cool.
I'm with you 100%.
Now, I'm German, and
on,
so I'm supposed to have a bias towards German cars, but my Tesla is way better than any German car. So, seeing that
Absolutely.
in, like, kind of, traditionalist French chefs, like this French Michelin-rated chef that's like, before I met him, he's like, dude, when I met him initially, he's like, just so you know, I'm not gonna like your product. Like, I'm gonna take it apart, I'm gonna give you some advice, but don't be offended that I'm not gonna like it. And then he eats it, and he's like, this is mind-blowing. This is the future, right? This is in the top 20% of all cheeses in this category, in this blue cheese category, and of all blue cheeses I've ever had. So that's really
Derrick.
And that's a good segue, right? Because for us, our footprint, our thesis was, could we make every restaurant have a Michelin star quality experience, right? Mm-hmm. And that's an orchestration problem, right? A problem that needs to be both precise as well as creative. And the thesis for all of this is like, everybody wants that proverbial Disney experience, right? That awe when they go out and they experience customer service, right? You can make the burger at home, especially when you talk about the latest and greatest in CPG, right? When you go out, you want an experience, and oftentimes you want that experience to be immaculate, right? And the goal there is that we can actually now accomplish that at scale, at various price points by leveraging AI in this magical way. So.
All right, I'm going to rush things along a little bit here because we've got about 13 minutes, 12 minutes left, but I think we can overrun a little bit. I'm sure Mike will give me a dirty look in a minute. Nope, he's checking his phone. Now, back to the awkward question. Okay. They say GPT-3, not even the latest one, cost $165 million in just the gas bill to train it. Is there an ROI on AI? I think, Ben, you covered a little bit, which is you don't need your own programs and stuff. Maybe you could pull together things. But how are people here in this audience going to get towards that idea? Are they going to make money with ROI, or is it going to be, we're going to educate the audience for a good 3 or 4 years, like we did with IoT, right? Let's be honest.
I think there's a huge ROI, right? I think that, the zeitgeist on the internet right now is, go do what you love for people, right? And we're now at a place where like everyone's saying, oh, we're like, most jobs are mediocre, right? Or most jobs can be or have some repetitive component to it, right? But like when you go to that Michelin star restaurant, the person that comes to greet you, they're actually extremely excited about creating this best experience that you've ever experienced in your life, right? And it's like, how do we take the passionate folks, give them and empower them to do what they want to do exceptionally well, and like that's going to create these new classes, right? And I think back to the core value proposition, that's where we're going to go, and I think that's the hugest ROI, right? As humanity, first principle, we've worked because we've had to work, right? I think the ROI now is we can actually have these exceptional experiences, say, hey, I actually want an AI garbage truck that's going to come out and pick up the garbage and go take it someplace safe, and then leave humanity to do the creative things that we've actually been empowered to do. So,
Oliver, anything? You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the question. I mean, I think the ROI comes from consumers, as Derrick said, consumers sort of winning in the end. In our case, the path to skill involves partnering with multi-billion-dollar dairy businesses, leveraging their existing facilities, leveraging their existing distribution channels, to get to consumers really quickly. And the reason they find it appealing is not just because consumers are more and more interested in sustainability and healthier foods, but because of this 10x competitive advantage I mentioned, we can actually make cheaper products. And when you have a product that is taste identical and cheaper, the majority of consumers don't care that it doesn't come from a cow, right? It really, they can't even afford to care, right? Most of us here can probably afford to care, but most consumers don't care. Actually, some consumers prefer prefer the increased simplicity of the product because people are
no, absolutely. I was going to say, like the alt proteins. I mean, Impossible won the Product of the Year award for CES about 4 years ago.
We were just yesterday, actually, we're on this good food finalist list with 10 other cheeses that are all dairy, right? We're the only non-dairy cheese, which is pretty cool.
That's great.
So this moment of elevating consumers, another example I didn't mention is a lot of consumers are allergic to the ingredients in milk, right?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
over 50% of all adults are lactose intolerant. A lot of people in Asia are milk protein intolerant. So, sort of creating a more equitable food system and making it cheaper and less allergenic and just overall healthier. Current animal ag is heavily subsidized and, sort of throws a lot of people into obesity and other problems.
Understood.
So there's so much upside, just this better in every way that the future, that is, I think, what people haven't really seen yet in the food movement, but it's coming.
I would say absolutely the ROI is there, but it's just depends on how you use it, And I think that's the big, I think we can see already at the moment a lot of recipe companies, some appliance companies as well, have been just excited about LLMs and are just generating recipes from scratch that are uncookable and deliver results that could poison you. So Mike actually did a great article on one of them. So it's however, if you leverage LLMs in the right way, you can deliver amazing results for consumers. I think we can now deliver adaptation from like making a recipe gluten-free or scaling it up or scaling it down and the likes with in something that can be delivered in a matter of weeks, which could have taken hundreds of engineers years.
I was going to say, Oliver, yours is the same thing. You're using machine learning to speed up the scale of the innovation. So the ROI will appear because you also have an intrinsically new product. I think I think in your case it's just that people are still not really clued in as to how much friction there is between the communication between that. And if you can ease that, the customer's experience and of your company or whatever goes up. So that's great.
And two, like the human side as well, right? So like food allergies, right? I have a friend that's allergic to finfish, right? Most folks are allergic to shellfish, right? And so it's like, think of cooking with fish oil, all of the different contaminants that actually are life and death, right? That now there's a high precision to have technology actually.
I'm gonna bring Oliver in here because
I just want to add something to that that's so important to me. This notion that humans have always tinkered and it would be unnatural for us to tinker. We've usually done that in adaptation to environmental pressures. When my ancestors in particular in Central Northern Europe moved north, and we started using animals to have this bizarre but also innovative idea to use the milk from another mammal, which no other animal has ever done, right? It's kind of crazy, but also kind of innovative. It was an adaptation to an environmental pressure. There wasn't as much to hunt year-round. There wasn't as much food going. And so it was totally natural thing to do. So now it's really natural to adapt to the new environmental pressure. I don't know if you all know, there's more greenhouse gases coming from animal agriculture than all modes of transportation, flying, trucking, boating, personal transportation combined. More of a third of the world's fresh water is used. So it's natural for us to adapt to these environmental pressures, and the only way to do it, because we can't spend 10,000 years trying all possible ways to combine plants, is to use AI to accelerate. But fundamentally, it's the human intellect training the AI to do it. So it's a totally natural process.
Okay, so that segues nicely into our final sort of like section. I sort of skipped a bit because we're a little bit stressed for time, but it's the ultimate awkward question. So AI, one of the first use cases for AI and automated reasoning was the stock market. And some of you who are already old enough will remember the 1987 crash, Black Monday, where all the systems had a race error and suddenly like, oh, actually everything's worth nothing. We'll just dump it all, right? Now, with that, I was going to say my final question, which is plastics, Teflon, social media, oil, data. As industry leaders and product planners, what are some of the long-term things we should be aware of with AI? Everybody's bandying the word AI and ethics, especially in like Harvard Business Review and stuff, and really there's no insight there. But really, I think, looking back at the genie that came out the bottle with social media, we could have seen some things come up. Our hubris got in the way a little bit.
Ego, yeah.
Ego, right? Media Lab guy, I saw it all, right? What do you think we need to be aware of as we proceed with an AI-driven and an AI-stamped future? Okay, Derrick, go on. I know you want to say something.
I would
The others
say,
feel like, I don't know.
I would say, like, the categorization of people long term, right? I like history, I like reading books, the brave new worlds, right? Yeah. Like, I think we have a great moment right now to either empower us or like take us to some Drakian places, right? And I think long term, the tail end right now, like you mentioned, right? It's like we've socially engineered, black patterns on the internet to keep folks on their devices, right? And we now have this 10x tool called AI where we can either double down on that or we can find other ways to empower folks, right? And I think that's, for me, what keeps me up at night. It's like, how are we gonna use this tool? And in long term, is it for giving people back agency or is it to take more agency away, right? So.
Yeah,
that's a very good answer. I like that.
Completely agree with that message. I mean, my background being in studying the universe, one of the things that was most fascinating to me is the recognition that we live at this time, 13.7 billion years into the universe history, where the universe has created entities that can reflect back on all of it. Like, a few hundred years ago, we had no clue what's happening, how the universe started, how it will continue evolving, where we came from. We live in this thin sliver of time, how privileged, right? Where we can understand it all, but also the same thin sliver of time comes with this huge responsibility to use our intellect, appropriately, because we can literally go down the drain. We can decide whether we go down the drain of evolutionary history and just become one of many species in the universe that has not made it to the next level, or we elevate ourselves and the planet and the universe to the next level, and AI will play a crucial role in that. So it's an amazing moment to live, and I want to encourage everybody to just try to live up to that responsibility as much as we can to build technologies that are truly better for everyone and the planet.
Yeah, I agree. I agree very strongly with that. I also believe that it's rather like venture capital. I think venture capital is learning there are some things that they should not invest in, and many founders are learning that they shouldn't be invested in by those venture capitalists. Yeah. It's great for software.
Yeah, a lot of venture capital hasn't really been focused on the greater good. It's been focused on short-term.
Well, that's the thing. That's
getting people hooked short-term. And that needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Ben?
Yeah, I would agree that we need these sort of longer-term views. And again, completely agree with the point that we're 13 billion years into the universe's existence, and it's the next couple of decades that are actually so important to just what becomes of humanity. And there's a massive responsibility, not just on the consumers, but really on the corporations that are in the audience here today. So it's again very proud of our partnership with Panasonic and seeing the steps that they're making to replace plastics and packaging and the likes as well. But we need to see that responsibility across all corporations, across all leaders, and to move generally in that right direction.
Absolutely, great. All right, so we've got 1 minute 40 seconds. What's the thing that excites you most about our path forward in the short term? What excites you the most about AI in food and food products and stuff in the short term? This is the bit where you go, well, I hope that they're going to...
Well, what I'm hearing here from Oliver sounds pretty bloody exciting.
I mean, I know, absolutely. I'm like, wow. But with you, Ben, I mean, you're dealing with essentially pressure cookers. I mean, pressure cooker, like instant pots and stuff as a client. My kids bought me one. I didn't use it for ages. When I did use it, I was like, this is the best thing ever. I fell in love with it. Absolutely.
I'd say within Fresco's organization and the platform and the kitchen appliance space and what we're building out, what I'm most excited about is, what I believe Fresco are selling to the market and consumers is that sort of delightful glow you get when someone's licking the plate of the food that you've just cooked for them.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
And it's more sustainable, it's more healthy, and we have the opportunity to deliver that for consumers. So building this experience that deeply integrates with these appliances, with this step-by-step guided cooking that understands exactly when your food is cooked, not cooking it for an
Let me get
arbitrary
Derrick
amount of
thinking.
time.
See, who's bursting? Is that irrepressible?
Yeah. So for us at Encounter AI, it's really empowering frontline workers, right? It's like when you take both the density of what that industry represents here in the U.S., but then two, like the service industry is people, right? And so when we talk about how to apply these technologies, it's giving them agency, it's empowering them. And for us, like we've never seen this moment in time, and I'm extremely excited that like organizations, corporations are actually ready and deploying capital in these fields to actually accelerate this movement. So.
Oliver, I just want to pair you with like a couple of Michelin-starred chefs and see what happens. I mean, so what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean,
You.
There's so much I'm excited about. A very optimistic and excitable person. But one thing I just want to thank the organizers here too. I think one thing to be excited about is, especially during this time, we need good journalism, and the work that Mike, you have been doing at the Spoon. I've observed it for a while, and it's great. I am personally very excited about, when it comes to our company, about just getting our products to more consumers. We hope to launch in retail later this year, next year globally. Raising another round of funding right now to accomplish that, because while we don't need to invest in CapEx, we still need to invest in a team of smart data scientists and business dev people and so on. I guess I always like to think of something we haven't discussed on this panel. Something I'm hopeful will happen is packaging in food. I find I've always been a foodie, and I find the amount of packaging in food it's kind of gross. It has become sort of unappetizing. It's not. It's sort of a turn off.
It's competing for attention on the shelf space, right?
And so I'm really hoping to see some.
I have an angry red light here. I'm going to have to stop you, gentlemen. Audience, please feel free to come up to the stage when I finish up here and talk to the audience and exchange cards, ask questions, do what it is. Get the most value from CES. And I'm just going to end with what I'm most looking forward to is a project I did at the Media Lab about 20 years ago, which was, I want products with personality, right? So I was working on the first one. I was actually working for Rich Miner after that, but one of the things I said is we need to develop relationships with these products. And discourse engines, sheer innovation, and some sort of agency is what we're going to need. So I'm looking to you, gentlemen, to provide the future for all of us here. Can we have a round of applause, please, for the audience? Thank you. For the panel.